Hi, back at the Rhode Island shore again and discussing my journey through the Way of Mastery. For a period of about 9 years, in addition to studying the formal teachings, listening to the channelings of the Way of Mastery, going to some workshops with the channel of the Way of Mastery, JM, and having all the experiences that came from doing the workbook. And workbook, The Way of Mastery, really is a little different from the course. It's 3 volumes: The Way of the Heart, Way of Transformation, and Way of Knowing, and originally given over a 3-year period. So it's a lengthy process, though people sometimes speed that up now. But the Way of the Heart's really profound, deepening. Way of Transformation's full on. Joshua said to me in a channeling through JM that the Way of Transformation is really a version of A Course in Miracles. So it's that type of deep work. And I would share also, I don't think the course is for everyone. I think that he said somewhere in the Way of Mastery that, I think he said it in a private session with me, he said that those who will benefit most from the course are those who think like Helen. And I was a very avid Course in Miracles student, seeing it as the be-all and end-all. And he said, well, Joshua said this, I really believe this is true, too, from my experience. Said that, the course was given as an answer to the question asked by 2 individuals. 2 people probably know this story, but these people working together, Bill Thetford and Helen Schuchman at Columbia University, had a very strained professional relationship. And so at one point they said, there's got to be a better way. What's a better way to do this than this crazy conflict and jealous sort of relationship we're having? The course was actually given as an answer to that question. So when I was asking Joshua a question once in this series of 9 years of sessions I had with him, about one a year, from 95 to 2004, I was asking about the course, and he said, remember, this is something that was given as an answer to 2 people that might also apply to others. That's a stark difference from a lot of course teachers and people in the community who would say, oh, this is, the new Bible or the completion of the Bible, what have you. I see it as compatible with Jesus' teachings in the New Testament, expanding them, but then I see the Way of Mastery is going further still. Same progression, a lot of the same themes, forgiveness just as one example. But I'm going through these teachings and having these sessions with JM, and a lot of things are coming through, a lot of things about the course, a lot of things about other things, and the thing I really want to emphasize here is that it's not like if it's a challenging path for you, welcome to the club. And if life is challenging and scary, welcome to the club. I've been incredibly terrified much of my, I don't feel this way now. I don't feel this way most of the time, but I've been in a lot of fear a lot of my life. And it's it's a confession. I mean, it's not something I'm proud of. But it says in the Way of Mastery somewhere, if you give your life over fully to the Holy Spirit, only the Holy Spirit knows how to bring you home, how to basically get you out of hell and back to truth, and back to the more loving, meaningful reality. That's true. He says, if you give your life over to the Holy Spirit, you will encounter your greatest fears. Now, that's just a sentence. But, and you will encounter your greatest fears because those are the obstacles between you and the Father, is the way it puts it. But that's been my experience a lot of the time. This is like a process of going through rings of fear. Because fear is what's got a grip on our consciousness. It's what's false that we're seeing is true. And it's always meaninglessness that creates our suffering. It's not the event that creates our suffering. It's not going to some room somewhere and somebody shoots a needle in our arm, right? It's the context. In other words, does it make sense to us? Is it a doctor who's giving us a vaccine and there might be a little pain, but there's not this angst and suffering and terror for months? Or is it, being dragged to some room somewhere and that happening? That would be more scary. But what Joshua is saying in his teachings in the New Testament, in A Course in Miracles, in the Way of Mastery, is basically this: that any time we're afraid, it's because we're seeing something that isn't there. Every time that we're suffering, it's because of our limited perspective, and we're being given an opportunity to connect with something that has a greater perspective that can heal us. But we have to be willing to give up our attachment to being right, because we're better off if we're wrong. So that's the basic philosophy there. And it's always, I've learned also that fear is always a false belief. It's a belief, it's basically some form of the belief that, what if reality wasn't real? And then you go into kind of this delusional nightmare imagining what that would be like. And it's possible to create a whole world of that type of question. And that's a testament to our amazing creativity. So I have this one thing that happened, and it consumed me for years. And this is during the sessions I'm having with Joshua. I always wanted to be a super honest guy financially. It just made me feel better. Like if I could get away with saving $10,000 and I knew I'd get away with it, by not declaring some income to the IRS, I'd always declare it, because I just wanted to feel like I was doing it right. Well, something happened for a while, and I'll say it's because of my misunderstanding of the situation. Again, it's always misunderstanding that causes the problems. But I had an accountant for years, and I found out that she had done something in the accounting that I wasn't sure I felt okay with. In fact, I thought it wasn't okay. In hindsight, I think it's okay. This is years later, but that's not the point. The point was I became convinced that for 10 years she'd been writing off something in my business, because I'm self-employed as an artist, that I didn't think was a legitimate write-off. And I went into this profound terror. Again, I wasn't worried about the IRS. I was worried about me feeling guilty and judging myself for not being honest. And I went into this bothered me for years. And I didn't know what to do. I had surrendered all my taxes, as I do to everything, to the Holy Spirit. So it's really about me not trusting the Holy Spirit. And I'd ask for it to be fair, and I would always declare everything, and I know people don't. So maybe it's fair not to, whatever, the specifics don't really matter. But I went to this intense terror of feeling like I'd done something wrong, and that there was no way I could repay it, because I had no idea how to repay it. And the way the IRS does stuff, if you're going back 5 years in penalties and interest, it's going to be $20,000 for a mistake of $1,000 write-off. So I could completely destroy myself financially and make this huge contribution to the IRS, but I still didn't know if that was right. So I was in this place where, I think Will Rogers said once, the American humorist, he said, just got finished doing my taxes. He says, I don't know if I've just completely ripped myself off or am a criminal. They're so complicated and so vague, and I had no idea. At one point, I asked 6 different professional accountants for advice on one simple deduction, and they all gave me 6 totally different answers. So I'm a guy pursuing truth and having a very particular literal mind about what the truth is. A lot of people might say, oh, okay, just forget about it. That's what everybody said, actually. You're probably fine. They probably won't find out. That's not what I was worried about. I was worried about not knowing that I was doing it right and feeling guilty because of it. But the terror was so intense. I think the only time in my life I've ever woken up in the middle of the night sweating and like cold with sweat from terror that I've done something wrong, and I would say I deserve punishment, and I don't know how to heal it. This is this primal thing going on, and everybody's like, Dave, why are you so upset about this? Just let it go. You shouldn't be so upset about this. So I'm going through this for months, like 6 months. And finally I have a session with Joshua. And now I'd started describing with him, right? I described earlier how he taught me. He said, if you want to talk with me on a more regular basis, just write out the questions and I'll write the answers. And that had really progressed. That had been going for a long time. But I'm still struggling. I'm getting the answer from him. He's saying, no, it's fine. You gave it to the Holy Spirit, trust. But I'm not able to. I want to, but I can't. I can't get past it, and it's interfering with everything in my life, and I'm terrified. And as is typical with my sessions with Jeshua over these 9 years, I'd struggle with some issue and try to come up with all of the viewpoints on it that might give it meaning for me. But this one I had no luck with. So this is very typical of a session with Jeshua. So I went in and explained the situation to him. He said, first of all, he said, congratulations on creating such a conundrum. And I said, yeah, thanks. And so then he said, beloved friend, we think there's something you're not considering. And I go, oh man, here it comes. Again, this dude has every answer for everything. And one of the things I needed was an answer that really appreciated the sense of scale with which this was terrifying me. As I said, I'd been doing the scribing in between the last session and this session. I'd been doing this scribing all the time. And he'd asked me to stop at one point. So, okay, so I'm scribing, and now I'm in this terror and he's not there, and I'm feeling a little left, abandoned. But one night I remember I go into such profound terror that I'm like shaking in bed, and I have to leave a party that I'm at and just go lie down in another room. And I'm in so much fear, and I think back to all this spiritual stuff I've done. I wouldn't say I was a fearful guy generally. I mean, before my fall with 16. So it's not easy for me to see myself as someone who's afraid a lot, but you just got to go through what you go through. So I'm in this intense fear, and I think, is there anything I can do to help with this? And I remember there's a lesson in the Course in Miracles it's called the Holy Instant. You just imagine that now is all there is of time, and everything. It's like everything freezes. Now is all there is of time. Now. And it's like resetting a computer. Everything just freezes like a photograph for a second, and then it's like all the past associations in your mind are gone, and for a second you have relief. So I thought, well, will that work? I'll practice the Holy Spirit now, even in the midst of this intense terror. And sure enough, just for an instant, there was peace. So this fear continues, and I'm dealing with it every day, and I've got to keep making the same deductions in my work because it's a daily thing. I take a trip somewhere, is it deductible? And there are all these gray area calls, and that's pervades my life. So because art's such a big part of my life, so I'm having to deal with it every day, and it's just horrible. So I finally go into this session, as I say, ask the question, Joshua, what's up with the tax thing? And he said, well, first of all, you gave it to the Holy Spirit, so it has been kept fair and honest, even if you're not understanding it as such. It says, but secondly, we think there's something you haven't considered, and that's this. Governments are formed by human beings, and they're a reflection of human consciousness. And taxes are a function of government, they're part of government. It says, in your world, and I was reminded that they say the two certainties of this world are death and taxes, the world which Yeshua says is the opposite of the kingdom. So taxes are actually given that level of significance in the story, death and taxes. The big stories start with taxes. The story of Jesus' birth and Star Wars both start with tax disputes or tax issues. So he says, in your consciousness, in your world consciousness, taxes represent the belief that you have sinned, you have separated yourself from God, and that it's been so long and it's so complicated and you owe so much that it can never be repaid. And there is a terror there. And so I thought, my God, that honors, it makes sense to me, first of all. And secondly, it honors the depth of pain and fear that I was experiencing. I was actually experiencing my primal fear at being separated from God. And that's what it felt like. And worse than that, being in conflict with God, and that's what it felt like. So this amazing, it gave me meaning. It gave meaning to the depth of my fear, and it gave meaning to the tax thing. And then he says, we see that The laws are created to be so complex that they can't be followed ever. You can never get it right. And that was freeing for me, because if I can't get it right, I in a sense can't get it wrong, and I could learn to trust the Holy Spirit more to just be in charge of it, which I do now with peace. He said, within your tax laws, we see that if they chose that anyone could be chosen with infinite back taxes, because that's the way that he says, if you want to have a little fun with it, you'll realize you can never get it right in your world. That's part of it. It's designed to be something which represents the belief that you can't get it right, that it's too much, it's too old, you owe too much. And I do see there's this primal fear that humanity has around the subject of taxes. Everybody wants to avoid it. And people say, oh, well, I pay my taxes and it's right. But I tell you, you don't. You don't, because no one pays. There's all kinds of stuff I could go into, because I spent 1,000 hours on this. But trust me that it doesn't matter anyhow. That you don't owe God anything. We're not in debt, and it's all an illusion, because there's never been a separation, and we've never done any harm to God. That's the upshoot of this. And there will be situations where it seems like we can get lost in this thicket that we can't get out. And Joshua said to me one more thing. He said, the other thing, beloved friend, is I asked you to stop connecting with me at this time, because you had come to the point in your journey where you needed to confront terror itself, and to resolve your relationship with terror itself. And I had told him the story about the Holy Instant. He said, and you notice that even then, even in the midst of pure terror, pure white terror, you still had the power, and this is true for all of us, you still had the power to choose again, and to choose a form of peace, and to break the terror. Even if just for a second, the fact that it could be done at all proved that it could be broken. So another story from my channelings with Joshua, and how he would come up with the most amazing, healing, profound stories that I don't know what I ever would have done without these sessions. And it's one of the reasons I want to convey them to you. I hope that you can benefit from my telling about them as I benefited from experiencing them. Thank you for listening.